just to go back a little bit, we have to just state the facts, right? And as much as I don't like to focus on the past, because I think that can cloud your judgment, and what happens is you're so busy looking behind you, you're not looking ahead. So I don't like to do that. But for my true tribe, my people that are here now, I just want y'all to understand, because a lot of y'all like, I love y'all flavor, y'all swag, I'm loving it. But why are you so angry? Why do you sell drugs? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? So this video is to give you a better understanding, because again, we listen to understand. We don't listen so we can hurry up and combat what is being said to us, right? So let's go back. The unfortunate reality, the unfortunate fact remains, society was comfortable with one way of looking, one way of living, one way of talking, right? Anything outside of that realm was abnormal, and abnormalities were treated differently back then. Thankfully, they are more accepted now at this stage of life. But going back a little bit, going back even to the 50s, less than 100 years ago, things were not well received, right? For anything that was outside of the norm. How that tied into people of color was, if you did not fit within that box, you were deemed everything but a child of God, pretty much, right? How that impacted my culture, my people, if you look like me, is everything, you know, from employment to living, you know, residences, eating, all of that was affected simply because of not fitting in that box. Now, without going too deep into that, because I discussed this years ago in a video, and I'd rather not focus on the past. I just want my people to understand, because as always, I really appreciate y'all being here, and I know it's like an elephant in the room and you just don't understand and you just don't feel comfortable asking about it, and I get it, right? It's not really comfortable, so I'm here to offer that information, so hopefully you understand, right? So going back to those days, people of color were treated differently, harshly, and many other verbs I can use to describe those days, those times. Now, what that did was it made living so much more difficult for us, you know, just for us to get a job, or for us to be happy even, just for something as small as that, we weren't able to do, simply because we did not look like everyone else. And because we didn't look like everyone else, that resulted in us being not so nice things happening to us, right? Boom. So fast forward a little bit, it almost became the norm. It almost became like a regular thing, because what was the norm, what was on television, on the radio, and deemed, I don't want to say perfect, but deemed normal, were people that were of Caucasian skin, right? Now, because of that hindrance, a lot of black men were not able to provide, or if they were able to provide, they weren't able to provide half as well as people that were a part of the norm. Those people were able to get the jobs, they were able to get the wives, they were able to live a happier life, an easier life, simply for something none of us can control, which is the color of our skin. How this ties into BMF is, well, I'll explain that in a second. So, like I was saying, with us not being able to survive, meet the necessities of life, some people resorted to substances to cope, right? Some people found quicker and easier methods to feed their families, because let's put ourselves in someone else's shoes, especially if you don't look like me. Imagine having a wife, having kids, applying for so many jobs over and over and over again, and the door being shut on you every time. Imagine someone from the same neighborhood you live, driving a nice car, seeming like they have little to no worries at all. And the reason for that is because they sell drugs, right? Also, imagine being a child and either watching your family struggle or just being around a bunch of people in the same demographic area you reside that are not having the same struggles you see all the time. Children repeat what they see. That is a fact. That has also been discussed on my channel, and I feel like I may discuss it again for all the new members of our tribe, just so we are all on one accord. Children repeat what they see. The developmental stages of life, ages 2 through 8, you don't learn any other way besides repeating what you see. You're not in school. You can't read. So all you do is repeat what you learn or are taught by the people you're around. So if you are taught to use substances to have fun, or if you're taught to sell drugs to make a living, most of the time, you're gonna do the same thing. Now, this is not always, but there are always exceptions to the rule, always. But for a lot of people, what are you gonna do? Now, I in no way, shape, or form am excusing this behavior. I don't agree with poison being pumped into my community, any community, let alone mine. I don't agree with that at all. But just because you don't agree with something doesn't mean you can't try to understand where it came from. And that's what's wrong with the world right now. The fact that nobody's trying to understand anything. It's just their opinion is vital, and that's what they're going to go by, and that's what it is. So, you know, as I mentioned, there is a supremacy Caucasian people are automatically born into. They don't even have to agree with it. But the fact remains, if you're white, you're right. If you look a certain way, you're more likely to get the job, to get the house, to get the credit, all that, than someone else that is of color. That's just what it is. And that's the way it's been for hundreds of years. And it's unfortunate, but again, that's just what it is. So with that said now, right? For generations, there are certain people that only see one thing. Now, they may go to school and hear about other things, but for the most part, all they see is this way to make money. I didn't see that, but I can't imagine what it would have been like for me if I did. You know, if I was in an environment where I had to share milk to eat my cereal, because that was what was on the show. And even if that wasn't a part of the story, their story, that's somebody's story. That's a fact. It came from somewhere. You know what I'm saying? So these are all things we have to be mindful of. Lies, okay? Jealousy, lack of confidence, a lot of things that ties into why people mistreat other people for no damn reason. Because there is no lucid reason anybody would be doing or saying anything negative about anybody. That's not a normal behavior. So anytime somebody does something abnormal, it's a reason for that. Happy people don't do like that. That's just what it is. If you are happy, you're not going to be talking about somebody. You're not going to be doing negative things to harm anybody. That's just nothing but projection right there, right? So, in short, the show depicts a Christian family, 2 hardworking parents with 3 kids. The 3 kids are young. The family is poor. So poor, the siblings have to share each other's cereal. Now, if you are under the sound of my voice, imagine that being you. Imagine having to use the cereal, the milk from the cereal that your sibling didn't finish with their cereal. Can you imagine that? For real. Let's put our compassionate hats on and let's put ourselves in other people's shoes just for a second, because thankfully we don't have to stay there, right? So we could do that for a second. Imagine watching your parents, your mother and your father, go to work every day, bust their butts every day, and come home with so little money. They're on government assistance that affords them just enough milk for you to have with your cereal and then pass down to your sibling. What would you do? Now, things have gotten so much better, you know. We are lucky. We are blessed if you look like me. Because there are so many people that don't look like me, that don't agree with that type of behavior. But the fact remains, going back to those days, there was a majority, and that majority did agree with the mistreatment. The mistreatment was a domino effect, not only for the person they were mistreating, but for the family members of the people, of the person they were mistreating, right? So it trickled down to the kids, to the elderly parents, the disabled parents, family members, whatever. It trickled down. It wasn't just them, it was them and everybody around them. So now, with them not being able to afford damn near anything, what were they to do? Now, again, as a friendly reminder, I do not agree with pumping poison and poison looks different ways besides substances. So I don't agree with any poison being pumped into my community. Any community. Every community is my community, right? I don't agree with that at all. But we have to get to a point where we are mature enough to have a level of comprehension of what transpired. Otherwise, we just gonna stay in that little box, and that's just gonna be what it's gonna be. And that's not the way life is supposed to be. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the ability to be so intelligent, right? So like I was saying, on the show, you see the parents, the mother worked at a fast food joint, the father, I forget where he worked, but their combined incomes did not afford them to pay their mortgage on time. Not only that, it didn't even afford them the option of being able to pay for their children to eat a regular meal without sharing the leftovers from that regular meal. What if that were your children? What would you do? In a previous video, recently, I was talking about desperation. Desperation, jealousy, hatred, it's certain words you have to stay clear of, like you literally have to, in order to stay sane. Aside from impacting you and your family's karma, just to stay sane, is certain things you have to stay away from. So, you know, as much as I disagree with doing that, I'm so grateful to God that I never had to be in a position where whatever other necessity of life is required, especially when you add children into the mix, right? That's where the substances come in as well. And by substances, I'm not just referring to narcotics. I'm referring to anything that is used in excess and either has to be prescribed or you have to be a certain age to purchase, right? So when you tally all those things up, I don't know about everybody else, but for me, it really puts things into perspective, because I cannot imagine what it would have been like for me if I had the family that could not afford milk for me to eat my cereal, or for me to go on a school trip, or for me to get clothes that were not worn over and over and over again, or hand-me-downs, or anything wild like that. This is where the compassion that is in everybody, this is where it has to come into play. Because, again, you cannot agree with the behavior and still feel bad for what led to that behavior, because every action has a reaction. Nothing comes out of nowhere. It's always for a reason. And in that case, on that show, the reason was because they watched their families struggle so badly, and then saw a neighborhood person over here living La Vida Loca, driving a nice car, able to afford to give money, and that was all they saw. That's another thing that's very important to remember, because if all you see are people that work hard, but have no end result, versus people that put poison into the street and live the lavish life. What are you gonna do? It's easy to say at this stage in life, oh, I wouldn't do that. It's no way. Or that is so simple. But like I said, when you have a wife, when you have kids, when you have family that is depending on you, and you have no other resort because 1,000,000 doors have been closed in your face because segregation just ended, so you're still being treated like SH. You're still not given the same opportunities as the same person that bleeds red like you, that uses the bathroom like you, and so forth. What are you gonna do? I wish we were just mindful of those things before we pass judgment on other people. That's all I wanted to say. That show is a really good show. Not only is it entertaining, but I feel like it's informative, because if you did not see that or did not live that, you have no idea. And for many of you, you'll wonder, like, why the hell, especially if you are under a certain age and you weren't even a part of that time period where things were done so differently just for looking different. If you listen to the way someone like me was described, it's a huge reality check. So that's all I wanted to say. You know, at the end of it all, it's not a good look at all to do anything like that. That is like one of the most disgusting things, in my opinion. But we have to be mindful of what led to that. I wonder how things would have been for everybody if we were afforded the same opportunities. If everybody that looked like me were given an opportunity to go and work at a job where they could afford the necessities, if nothing else, putting everything else aside, vacations, put all that to the side, just if you were able to feed yourself and your kids, feed you and your family, clothe you and your family, and keep a roof over your head, I wonder how things would be. So that kind of explains the chip on some people's shoulders. On the flip side, I kind of feel like all that sacrificing and all that stuff that was endured all those years ago got us to this point. And now there really is no excuse. Now there's no excuse. That's what your ancestors fought for. That's how I feel. So I'm going to leave that there. If you haven't seen BMF, watch that show. Trust me, you will be entertained. You will love it. You will learn from it. And start from the beginning. Don't go from the middle on. No, go back to the beginning and get the origin of it. Maybe even look up their story. It's very informative. Love y'all. Thank you for listening. Namaste. I hate that. Namaste.